we're moving on to our monomial and polynomial unit, and we're working on our first notes assignment. So when you're multiplying monomials, the first thing you're going to do is multiply the coefficients. So those are the big numbers out front of your letters. And then you add the exponents for like variables. So if I have x to the second and x to the first, I'm going to add those two numbers together and I get x to the third. Each letter should be only written once in your final answer. Okay, so let's look at this first one. I got 4x, x squared, y to the third, and those are all being multiplied. The first thing I'm going to do is any letters that don't have a number, I'm going to put a little 1 on it so I remember that it's there. Okay, so now I have big numbers, or my coefficient. So my coefficient for this one is going to be this 4. There's no other big numbers or coefficients, so my coefficient is going to stay the same. That one's still going to stay a 4. And then I'm going to add my exponents. Because I have x to the first and x to the second, and because they're both x's, when we multiply those, we actually add those exponents. So that's going to give me x to the third. And then I still have this y to the third. There are no other y's, so I'm just going to leave that y to the third. So that's going to be my final answer for number 1. Let's look at number 2. Okay, first thing I'm going to look for is my coefficient. So this -3 is my coefficient. I'm going to look through. There are no other coefficients, so my coefficient is going to stay that -3. I'm going to put any numbers on my exponents that don't, or any exponents I have on a variable that don't have one. So I have x to the first times y to the second times y to the third times x to the second. So I'm going to group them according to their same letter. So I have x to the first and x to the second. If I add that 1 plus that 2, that's going to give me x to the third. And then I have y to the second and y to the third. That's going to give me y to the fifth. Let's look at number 3. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is look at my coefficient. I have a -26. I don't have any other coefficients, so my -26 is going to stay a -26. Then I'm going to add exponents on anything that doesn't have them. And now I'm going to group them according to each letter. So I'm going to start with my x's. I have x to the first and x to the first. If I add those together, that gives me x to the second. Now I'm going to do my y's. I have y to the third and y to the first. That's going to give me y to the fourth. And then I'm going to look at my z's. I have z to the 8th and z to the 1st. That's going to give me z to the 9th. So that's going to be my answer for number 3. Let's look at number 4. Okay, start with my coefficient. I have a coefficient of 2. I don't have any other coefficients, so my coefficient's going to remain a 2. I'm going to look and put any powers on any letters that don't have a power. Looking at my variables. So I put a first on that y to the first. Okay, anytime you have the power of 0, so when I look at x to the 0 power, that 0 is going to turn into a whole number 1. And your coefficient 2, and if I turn that x to the 0 power to a 1, so if all of this changes to a 1, and it's a big number coefficient 1, and I have 2 times that 1, those are not going to change at all. So I just kind of slash it through. I say I'm not even going to worry about any letter that has a 0 on it. I'm just going to get rid of it, and because it's not going to change the final answer. Okay, so I'm going to go through and find all of my letters that are the same. I'm going to start with x, and I have x to the third. I don't have any other x's, so I'm going to keep this x to the third. My next would be my y's. So when I look, I have y to the first. I don't have any other y, so I'm just going to keep this y. And you can say y to the first if you like it there, or you can just say y. And then lastly, I have my z's. And that's going to be a z to the third, so I'm going to keep that z to the third. Okay, let's look at number 5. Okay, we're getting a little bit more complicated. We're going to do our big numbers first. So when I look, I have 5 out front. I don't have any other big numbers, so this is going to stay a 5. Now I'm going to look at my letters, and it doesn't matter that they're in parentheses. We're still going to do it the same way. I have x to the 7th and x to the 6th. If I multiply those together, I'm really adding those powers. That's going to give me x to the 13th. Let's look at number 6 here. Okay, now we have one that has more than one coefficient. I have a coefficient, or a big number 4, and a coefficient, which is a big number, -7. So 4 times -7 is going to give me a -28. So that's my coefficient number is going to be that -28. And then I'm going to just go and put any numbers on, or powers on any variable. So I have a to the first, b to the 6th, I have a to the second, and b to the third. I'm going to start with my a's. So I have a to the first and a to the second. That's going to give me a to the third. And then I have b to the 6th and b to the third. That's going to give me b to the 9th. And I am all done because I don't have anything left. Okay, let's try number 7. Start with my coefficients. I have a -2 and an 8. Those are going to give me a -16. I'm going to put numbers on all my variables that don't have them, just so I don't forget about them. Okay, and I also see z to the 0 power, so I'm going to cancel that one out. That one's not even going to be there because I know that's going to turn into a 1, which isn't going to change my -16 at all. So I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, now I'm going to do my x first. So I have x to the first and x to the third. So that x to the first and x to the third, that's going to give you x to the 4th. Let's move on to our y's. I have y to the 3rd and y to the 4th. That's going to give me y to the 7th. And then I have the z to the 4th, and we don't have to worry about that z to the 0 power because that one does not. That turns into 1, so we don't have to worry about that. So I'm just going to leave that as z to the 4th. All right, last one. First, I'm going to take my coefficients. So I have 3 times a -2. So if I take 3 times a -2, those are going to give me a -6. Then if I take that -6 and multiply it by that 5, that's going to give me a -30. So my coefficient is going to be -30. And then I'm going to go ahead and put any powers on any letters and also eliminate anything I can eliminate. I'm going to eliminate that one. Okay, I'm going to start with my p's because they come first in this order of alphabet. So I have p to the 3rd and p to the 4th. That's going to give me p to the 7th. Move on to my q's. I have q to the 1st and q to the 6th. That's going to give me q to the 7th also. Oh, and I missed one. We also have a q to the 1st. Oops, wrong color. Q to the 1st right there. So instead of q to the 7th, that should have been a q to the 8th. And we are done. All right, you have everything you need to work on your first assignment in the monomial polynomial unit.